Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that takes important sources and, well, we try to pull out the stuff you can actually use. Today, we are getting into a really influential book, one that sparked a huge conversation. Excellent Sheep. It's by William Deresiewicz, who used to teach at Yale. And our mission for this deep dive is pretty straightforward, but I think quite important. We want to understand this strange situation at the heart of academic success today. How can it be that these incredibly talented, driven students, the ones who've achieved everything on the outside, often feel, well, lost,
Yeah.
anxious, like they're missing a real sense of purpose? So we're going to unpack the core issues, not just to critique elite schools, but to see what lessons we can pull out for our own lives, maybe even for how we think about family and expectations.
Yeah, it's a really striking contradiction that Deresiewicz highlights. He spent years watching these students who were just masters of performance, brilliant test scores, amazing extracurriculars. They could solve any problem you put in front of them. But internally, he describes this fragility. Things like, and I'm quoting here, suffocating fear, anxiety, loss, helplessness, emptiness, and loneliness. It's quite stark. They're incredibly accomplished, but they seem to drift, almost following a preset path without really choosing it. Hence the title, Excellent Sheep.
And it's tempting to think, okay, that's just an Ivy League thing, right? An American issue. But the book and the commentary around it makes it clear this isn't confined to one country.
Oh, absolutely not. This pattern, this link between high achievement and high anxiety, it's global. The source material talks about similar feelings in other high-pressure systems. You see terms like A, which is sort of a deep confusion or a kind of listlessness among top students in China, say at Tsinghua University. They talk about being exhausted by the intense, relentless competition. And sometimes you even see reactions like "sure" or lying flat, which is basically checking out of the competition altogether because it's just too much. You hear about similar pressures at places like India's IITs and IMs too.
So the common thread isn't the location?
No, it's the system. It's this fierce global competition for status for these limited spots that define success.
Okay, so let's really unpack that system. If this drive for elite success is actually creating anxiety and this feeling of being adrift, what are maybe the two or three really damaging ideas it's planting in these young people's minds? Where does it go wrong?
Well, the first thing I think, the most immediate damage, is the psychological toll. It even has a nickname, the Stanford Duck Syndrome.
Ah, yes, I've heard of this one.
Yeah, you know the image, right? The duck looks so calm, gliding smoothly on the water.
Effortless.
Exactly, effortless on the surface. But underneath, its little legs are paddling like crazy just to keep going. And that perfectly captures the pressure. Students feel they have to project this image of perfect control, of ease, while inside they're often completely overwhelmed, maybe even panicking. The stats Deresiewicz mentions are, frankly, scary. Like almost half of college students reporting feeling hopeless. University counseling centers are just swamped. The demand has exploded since the 90s. There's just no perceived room for error, emotionally or academically.
So they're constantly performing and constantly comparing their own frantic paddling to everyone else's calm exterior. That sounds exhausting.
It's incredibly exhausting, and it creates this really unstable emotional landscape. These students are often what he calls habitual winners. They've succeeded for so long.
Right, success is their default.
It is their default. And they start to fuse their identity with their achievements. So when they succeed, they feel unbelievably great, totally invincible. But the flip side is, when they hit even a small setback, they can plummet into feeling completely worthless. They're terrified of failure because, honestly, they haven't had much practice with it. They haven't learned how to fail, pick themselves up, and learn from it.
And that fear, that terror of failure, that must feed into the next big problem you mentioned, this whole cult of credentials and how it leads everyone down the same path. Tell us about the resume treadmill.
Yeah, it flows directly from that fear. The focus shifts almost entirely away from genuine learning, from intellectual curiosity, towards just collecting points, basically. Metrics. It stops being about understanding, say, history or physics deeply. It becomes about getting those 7 or 8 AP credits, loading up on 9 or 10 extracurriculars.
All carefully chosen.
Oh, meticulously chosen, usually involving buzzwords like leadership or volunteerism, but often in a way that feels very transactional, like you're doing it for the resume, not for the experience itself. The activity becomes an empty means to an end.
And the result of everyone chasing the same metrics
Is this incredible homogeneity in what comes next. It's ironic, really. These students are told throughout high school and college that they have limitless potential, that they're like stem cells, right? They can become anything.
Limitless options.
But then overwhelmingly, where do they end up? Tiny handful of careers. Finance, consulting, law, maybe big tech now. That's been added to the list.
Why those specific fields?
Because those are the socially approved signals of continued success. High status, high salary. They act as the default next checkpoint on the path they've been following since kindergarten. It feels safe. It feels like the expected next step.
Even if they don't actually care about banking or management consulting?
Often, yes. And this gets us to something Deresiewicz calls the paradox of potential. It's a really interesting point.
Okay, explain that. How does having all this potential, this amazing degree, actually trap them?
Well, the paradox is rooted in fear. It's the fear of closing doors. They've worked so hard for so long to keep every possible option open. So choosing something specific, something maybe less conventional, like working for a nonprofit, becoming a teacher, pursuing art, feels like a betrayal. It feels like they'd be wasting the potential, squandering the very expensive, high-status degree they just earned.
Like they'd be letting down the side, almost.
Exactly. Letting down themselves, their parents, the system. So they default to the paths that everyone recognizes as prestigious and lucrative. Status and money become substitutes for figuring out what they actually want to do. They've mastered the how of success, but they never really grappled with the what or the why.
Which leads us straight to the purpose of education itself. If the current system is churning out these high-performing but directionless students, what's the alternative? What should education be for?
Deresiewicz argues passionately for a return to what he sees as the true spirit of a liberal arts education. In Chinese, you might hear the term "qizhou." And this doesn't just mean studying English or philosophy, though those are valuable. It means an education that fundamentally embraces exploration, that allows for error. Who know is the phrase used in the source commentary.
Allows for error. That sounds risky in today's world.
It does, but it's crucial. It's about prioritizing self-creation, self-knowledge, and critical thinking over just skill acquisition. See, the current system often teaches you what to think, or at least how to follow the established rules, extremely well. A true liberal arts approach aims to teach you how to think critically, how to question the rules, and maybe most importantly, who you want to be. The goal isn't just training a worker drone, it's cultivating the whole person. Someone who understands not just how to perform a task, but why it matters, or if it should be done at all.
That sounds idealistic and honestly really appealing. But let me push back a bit, thinking about our listeners. How does taking time for self-creation, maybe exploring different things, really prepare someone for, say, the AI revolution, especially if they're facing huge student loans? Isn't picking finance or tech just the practical, rational choice? Risk management.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it absolutely speaks to the courage this path requires. It's not easy. But think about the longer term. What kinds of jobs are most likely to be automated by AI? It's often the routine, rule-based tasks. Many functions within finance and consulting, frankly, fall into that category. What's much harder for AI to replicate? Things like genuine creativity, critical judgment, the ability to synthesize ideas from different fields, and crucially, a sense of purpose that guides decision-making.
So the skills developed by exploring are actually more future-proof.
I think that's the argument, yes. The ability to adapt, to ask good questions, to define new problems, not just solve assigned ones that might be the ultimate form of long-term risk management. The current system might be training students for jobs that won't exist in the same way in 10 or 15 years. Real security might actually lie in that mental flexibility, that self-knowledge.
That's a really important perspective shift. Okay, let's bring this back down to earth a bit, maybe closer to home.
Yeah.
Because this pressure, this anxiety, it doesn't just exist in schools. It gets transmitted often without us even realizing it through families. The book talks a lot about parents, right?
It does, quite directly. And the insights are pretty powerful, maybe even uncomfortable for some of us. It discusses different parenting styles. You have the classic helicopter parents, always hovering, micromanaging, applying pressure.
We know those.
And then you also have the doting parents, the ones who maybe shower praise constantly, but also infantilize their kids, shielding them from any real challenges. And the book argues that despite the different approaches, both styles can end up undermining the child's development of genuine inner strength, of self-worth that isn't tied to external validation.
How so? What's the core message being sent?
Well, the implicit message, often unintentionally sent, is that only success makes you worthy of love. Achievement becomes the currency for affection and approval. This can create this chronic feeling of inadequacy in the child. They internalize the idea that parents' demands and expectations are endless and satisfaction is always brief. So they keep striving, keep chasing that next gold star, not necessarily for themselves, but to finally feel enough, to earn that sense of unconditional acceptance through performance.
Okay, so if I'm a parent listening right now, and this is maybe ringing a bell, what's the single biggest thing I should try to stop doing, like tomorrow morning, based on this critique?
That's a great question. I think the key is to recognize and stop reinforcing the virtual self.
The virtual self.
Yeah, because the child starts to believe that their real self, with all its doubts, anxieties, quirks, maybe even boredom, isn't acceptable, isn't lovable. So they become incredibly skilled performers. They learn to present a polished, articulate, happy front. They become, as the book says, excellent debaters in the adult world. They can give you perfectly logical reasons for why they're joining this club or aiming for that internship, but it masks this deep internal disconnect, sometimes even turmoil. So the behavior to stop is equating that external polish, that perfect resume, with the child's actual well-being or fulfillment. We really have to ask ourselves, are we pushing our kids towards certain achievements to fill some kind of void in our own lives? Are we seeking status through them?
Wow. That's a tough question to sit with. And that pressure, that need to perform, it leads to one of the most, well, ironic parts of the book for me. This whole idea of self-indulgence.
Oh, definitely.
Students start seeing genuine curiosity, like studying art history just because they love it, or taking a gap year to travel and figure things out as frivolous, self-indulgent, a waste of time. But then taking a high-paying job they secretly hate in, say, investment banking, that's framed as the responsible choice, the mature thing to do.
It's completely backwards, isn't it? The pressure is so intense, the focus on utility so ingrained that they actually confuse self-discovery, which inherently involves some uncertainty, some exploration with moral failure or laziness. They've been conditioned by what Deresiewicz calls the utility police, always asking, what's that for? How will that help you get ahead? They can't justify doing something just for its own sake, for the joy of learning or the value of experience.
The deep irony being that choosing a life dictated purely by external metrics like money and status, that might be the ultimate form of neglecting your actual self.
Precisely. And recognizing that irony is really the first step towards breaking free. So, okay, where does this leave us? What can we actually do if we feel caught in this or see it happening around us? The core message is about conscious disengagement, actively stepping off the treadmill. And step one, according to Deresiewicz, is asking different questions. Questions the system actively discourages because they don't have neat, measurable answers. They sound simple, but they're actually quite radical in this context.
Okay, what are they?
Questions like, what am I genuinely good at? Not just what gets good grades, but what feels natural, engaging. What do I actually enjoy doing? And crucially, what do I want to do? Notice the emphasis on the doing, the activity itself, not what do I want to be? Like what title, what status, but what kind of work, what kind of actions actually pull you forward? What goal feels compelling?
Focusing the process, not just the outcome. That makes sense. And that leads to the next step, which you mentioned requires real courage, spiritual imagination.
Yeah, this is maybe the toughest part. Spiritual imagination is the ability to envision and then have the guts to actually create a life path that doesn't fit neatly into the pre-approved boxes. Starbucks options, as he calls them, like finance, law, consulting.
Starbucks options, I like that.
It requires real bravery, especially because your choices might not get applause. Family might worry, friends might think you're crazy, society might label it as risky or impractical.
You have to be willing to go against the grain.
You absolutely do. You have to define your own path, even when the well-trodden one looks safer and gets more approval. But that internal compass, that's where real fulfillment comes from. Which brings us to the final piece, really, defining your own worth. Developing a core confidence that isn't dependent on your GPA, your job title, or the brand name on your diploma. Research consistently shows, and the book touches on this too, that lasting happiness tends to come from two main sources: strong, healthy relationships and engaging in work that feels meaningful to you, work that uses your best abilities in a way you find valuable.
So when you choose based on genuine interest, you're actually more likely to stick with it, push through challenges, and maybe even achieve a deeper kind of success in the long run.
That's the idea. It's paradoxical, but following your own curiosity might be more practical than forcing yourself down a path you resent.
Okay, so boiling it all down. The real point of education, maybe even of life, isn't just racking up achievements. It's about growth, about becoming who you are. Deresiewicz uses the phrase, the forging of the soul. If you come out of college or any significant life experience, basically the same person you're going in, same beliefs, same values, same unquestioned assumptions, then maybe you've missed the point. You've missed a chance to really grow.
It's a call to stop being the perfectly engineered excellent sheep.
And start acting like the independent, thinking adult you have the potential to become. All right, that gives us a lot to think about. Let's leave our listeners with one final provocative thought to chew on, building on all this. If you had to define your own value right now, today, without using any external labels, no job titles, no income figures, no degrees, no awards, what would actually be left? What makes you valuable intrinsically? And maybe more importantly, are you spending your time and energy cultivating that?